What's going on, guys? This is a kind of informal state episode where I am just trying to gather everybody on the events of the last week, particularly around the referendum contract and the governance debacles that have gone on. Maybe touch on some of the worker proposal stuff, and most recently, as of about, I guess, 2 or 3 hours ago, some accusations of vote collusion. So with that said, everybody's starting to come on. And I guess, Joe, you might enable your audio. Thomas, you may go ahead and enable your audio and video. What is going on, Daniel? How are you?
Not much. How you doing?
Good.
Are you asking to actually construct it or to actually be used as ingredients? Is this the talk?
What'd you say, Daniel? Oh, wow. Hey, Dave. Hey, Dave. He knows my name.
Is it being brought? You're just watching the
I'm hanging out. I'm hanging out, and I got to turn my video off because I'm on Sully a little bit.
Oh, I got you. Cool.
But I'll listen in until they bring me my main course here at the restaurant.
Okay, sounds good. So we've got Stuardo from EOS Meso. We've got Joe from EOS Asia so far. Daniel, the way, just so everybody on this call understands, so there's all kinds of issues that pop up, and we talk about stuff in the groups where we collaborate, but I like to try to have a recording and a public facing, collaboration with everyone, not unlike the EMLG calls, but more of informally what we think, and rather than it being in just in chats and stuff, for us to just record it and put it out there so we could kind of state our case more informally, and it's not so so rigid or anything, just so people can kind of just say what they think. And that's what the state is all about. So the state of your mind, the state of what's going on in the ecosystem, and just all that good stuff, the state of the software. So with that said, I'll let you kind of open up and introduce yourself, Daniel.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Daniel Keyes. I am a member of EOS Nation. I've been working alongside you and some others on a referendum smart contract process, and it's coming along pretty well. And happy to be here.
Yeah, I saw the last recording, and I fully agree. A lot more was kind of clarified in that, and I kind of understand. There's some things that a lot of us are new to delegated proof of stake systems. We don't have a long history, and obviously bit shares or steam it like some people. And I'd been going back and forth with with Luke, and he had pointed out, he was like, you have to go through the system contract and the EOSIO account to get 2/3 plus 1 to actually push anything through. And I'm like, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that anyone should be able to propose a referendum. Only having one count that can propose it, I think is bad. And he goes, that's, we obviously understand the technical limitations right now of why that is. But also, he made a really good point that I think we all should stop for a second and think about, because no one's really talking about this. If a referendum that's proposed does not have an exact tested code base or change that's being proposed, not just an idea, right? Then what does the 2/3 plus 1 actually push through? You know what I mean? If someone proposed, I want to change X, I want to change the name spacing to Bodie McBoatface or something, right? Or I want to change the EOSIO naming convention back to what it was, or even something that's harder to define, let's expand the block producers to the original 121. If someone doesn't have the exact code that goes with that, then those referendums should not be actually submitted. Referendums that actually have teeth and are this exact code that we want changed, or this exact Ricardian contract, or this exact change to the Constitution is what we want. And then that's voted on. And then that meets the minimum. And then the 2/3 plus 1 majority voted in. And then that becomes right. So, but that part that I just said isn't really being talked about. You know what I mean? Like, we're so focused on like, oh, well, who's going to have control over the account? Well, naturally, whatever gets approved is going to always be the top, 21, because they have the power to do that. They're the only ones with the power over the EOS IO account to actually push that through. The other side of that is if we did open that up to the public and we weren't filtering this stuff, like that could be a really big mess, like, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
You can get 10 different proposals that are almost identical and you get votes being split.
Right.
And it's a big mess.
Yeah. I mean, so you've been digging into this, so I'd like to hear your thoughts just in general about what your perception of maybe what people initially thought of, oh, there's only one account that can submit these. And it's like, well, if you open it, extend on that more so people understand that logic, I think a lot of people who are asking questions would benefit a lot from the concise way that you've said it in the group,
Sure. Yeah. I think the ultimate goal is to have a system in place where anybody can submit a proposal, but it's going to take time to build a process where that's manageable. So for now, the thinking is, we got to get something. There's a lot out there. There's a big need right now for a way to have a referendum. And rather than spend months or a year developing
the Greymass suggestion was like the plugin approach, the module was brilliant. Like, I think Jesta is going to jump on here in a little while, but I mean, Aaron was great suggestions. You know what I mean? I mean, but it may take 2-3 months to do that. Right.
In the meantime, there's things that need to be acted on sooner than that, ideally. So we're trying to get something available to the token holders so they can vote on issues in the meantime. And, something that's better than what we have now. That's a step in the right direction towards the ideal. This is an MVP, a minimum viable product. Yeah. So the idea is, okay, how can we, in the short term, kind of corral some of that chaos into it, prevent, like we said, 5 different proposals for essentially the same thing, just worded differently. And then that
splits votes. Yeah. At a time, like Josh pointed out, where, votes are really critical. We don't have 40-50% of the chain staking right now. So
exactly.
If we split those votes up, like there's a legitimate, that's a whole other problem too, because if that happened, that might be an attack surface or an attack vector that, people who didn't want referendum to go through. So it's important that we curate that. So my initial, and I can sometimes be a little alarmist at reacting to, I want people to understand that I have a heart for the guys who are like number 40 through 90, because we were down there for a while and a lot of us were like, screw the big guys. You know what I mean? Like that happens. You have these 3 classes of VPs, the incumbent 21, everyone up to about like number, 40, from 40 to like, 22, you guys can feel that. We're kind of like second class citizens, like, and then everyone under that's either right at the edge or, below getting paid. And there's a psychology that starts to happen. And, I have been a part of that and myself, and I've also experienced being above that, never experienced being a VP. You guys have, so you could relate to when you were, and then you're not. It's kind of a bummer, it bums you out. And we can become, I've seen people that it's not in their character or part of their VP operation to, point things out or point at another VP or what others are doing. Whereas that's very common in people who are just trying to come up because they're scrappy. And I had certainly had pointed this out. I'd said like early on, you're going to see people in the top 10 who are just all kumbaya and it's all like, love and peace and let's all get along. People kind of right at that edge of falling out might be, really aggressive with trying to front run new issues. And then people below that to about the top 40, from 22 to 40 might be just kind of scrambling to say, well, what can I do? But at the same time, I don't want to do something in bad taste and lose favor, and then everyone below that doesn't care at all. And the knives are out and they're like, whatever I got to do to come up. Mm-hmm. And that creates this dichotomy that is, it can be unhealthy. And me and Eugene have experienced that, and I'm just being publicly honest that people out there understand that that goes on, and I may make mistakes, but I'll be the first one to actually admit it too. You know what I mean? And I think that I definitely, just to admit to everybody, kind of misunderstood a little bit of what we were trying to do in the initial phases, as did we learned other people on the project too. It wasn't just me who were really technical, and they were like, oh, okay, well, that's okay. Yeah. And once I understood that, we all got a better understanding. It was like, okay, because now there's people putting out, you have to allow everyone to vote, to submit referendum. And it's like, well, that's technically not actually the way it works. And even if we did that, what would get passed? If we don't have a very specific, rigid, as Thomas has said, standard for making sure that the referendum that's being submitted doesn't have teeth, it doesn't have actual code that's been not just something you wrote, but has been tested within a test net, that it doesn't break anything and is like ready to ship. That's the kind of standard that we really want. And I think that most people out there, I'm doing that just for this reason, because this is a really complex issue. And like all of us chiming in and saying our piece is like a good thing right now, because there's about to start now the second wave of like conflict is going to bubble up, where people who don't have that understanding it's going to start spreading. So if we can reference this and kind of go into the detail why we're doing it, what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and then even solicit feedback, I think some of this stuff we could probably avoid a little bit of the FUD that has happened in the past. And the user research and user-centered stuff I talked about is great, but also just doing a little PR, just having these discussions and, openly, and then they see the discussions we're having. It's like, y'all guys are in a private group doing a colluding and doing all this stuff. It's like, here's the conversation that we're having. Like literally, this is what it is. And that's a big part of what I was trying to do. So if anybody else wants to chime in, I see we've got Joe from EOS Asia, Anthony Garcia, Antonio Garcia, Thomas. So yeah. Joe, did you want to chime in? I know that Defang and you are working on some stuff right now.
Right now, so it's very...
What'd you say, Joe?
I'm outside right now, so it's really noisy. But
you sound good. You sound good.
So recently, we're working on my EOS kit, right?
Right.
You know about it? We're trying to put most of the tools together in one place so that it's easy for the end user to understand where they should go and do all the operation related to EOS, right? So we were planning to add a referendum and a worker proposal system there. Right now, I'm personally in the team working for the worker proposal system. Mm-hmm. We're trying to figure out how to get a system that is like a minimal viable product one, that's going to be usable, but still limited, right? We don't want everyone to start to use a minimum viable product right now.
Right.
And the main goal, I think, with the referendum is to don't put something out that doesn't work good.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Because if we release something, it should be good. Imagine releasing a product which is not ready. After you want to upgrade it, right? But it's already broken. You cannot do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
did you release a lot of product in the past?
Yeah, I mean, they released EOS probably prematurely. You know what I mean? Like it's had bugs and it's had problems too. So that's that's a good point. I think that's so. You guys are what part of where are you at with the worker proposal system, or what are your perceptions of what needs to be done?
At the moment, we're deciding, and I think we're going to allow urgent proposal first, including the proposal number 2. I think you saw the charter, right? I can't listen. You're muted.
Yeah, I think it's getting a little complicated. Oh, there's Aaron from Greymass. I think it's getting a little complicated personally, because what I fear with the worker proposal system is that it will be so complex to traverse for smaller to mid-sized vendors that you'll have this whole account layer on top of it to just appease the project management people or the people who are validating the worker proposals. And a good part of the budget will be just appeasing that rather than doing actual work, because at this phase, you're going to have a lot of lean, smaller teams. And I personally, because I've seen that in the agency side where half the people eating up the budgets are just like account and spreadsheet people, and they don't do anything. They're not actually the worker bees. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's good to have one account person, but you've got 4 or 5 developers or engineers. In most modern situations for bigger like accounts or stuff like that, where you're on the hook for a lot of money, and a lot of public scrutiny in like regulated industries, you often have 4 or 5 account people and just like a couple of freelancers being spread thin and underfunded. So because there's so much, so I just fear that dynamic. It doesn't change just because it's a different industry. It's still, you know what I mean? That stuff still happens. So that would be my only fear, if we kind of are so rigid and put so many hurdles in place that you almost have to afford for a part of the budget or a significant chunk of the budget, a third of the budget, just to appease and keep up with all this like compliance stuff. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. If you guys want to chime in on that.
At the moment, we're deciding. So once we already finish all the decision, we will publish on the group, and we'll let everyone comment on that.
You don't have any personal opinions on that, though? Like you don't feel like, I mean, that's what this is all about. This isn't a formal meeting. This is meant to just be a recording so we can all say our opinions on stuff and what we would like to see, rather than the rigid like Scrum meetings where we're like trying to stay on a specific track. You don't have any personal opinions of what you would like to see in the worker proposal system? You want to see Brendan's version? Okay. Well, I guess he dropped out. Oh, he's back. Hello. Oh, there you are. Hey, Aaron.
Hey there. Sorry, I thought this was in like 10 minutes from now.
I think I started at 8:30, but I always try to do that so I can gather everybody at least by that time. So
awesome. So what are you guys talking about right now? The complexity of like reviewing worker proposals?
So the referendum contract and the worker proposal system are, the worker proposal system is dependent on what we do with the referendum contract, more or less. The same like tallying system and voting system. And then also, the decisions that we make, as Joe pointed out, are going to affect the worker proposal system. He just said that, he thinks it's better that we get that right. And that kind of leans more towards your proposal, where you were like, guys, we just need to create a plugin, a module for this and do it right and not rush into it, more or less. I mean, that was your general, what your post was about. So, and I don't disagree after looking at everything and fully. What was funny to me, and I was just saying this to Daniel, is that and you're super technical yourself. I mean, you're a programmer, you're a Steam witness, and it even eluded you the 2/3 + 1 with the EISO account, how that was handled. Mm-hmm. I noticed that on the recording, and I was like, okay. And Luke was like, do you even blockchain, bro? Like, do you, he's like super like, he's super like, standoffish about it. It's like, well, that's why I don't get upset about these things, because they're still working themselves. I'm like, Luke, like this is our first DPoS system. Like for some of us, like don't get mad, but fundamentally I understand that is how the actual referendum gets pushed through into the code base. But I think that fundamentally everyone should eventually be able to submit. That's where we were kind of clicking up. We're like, everybody should be able to submit a referendum, and whoever gets the support, even if it is a mess, that's DPoS. Yeah. And that, it's not meant to be centralized. Like our centralized educational effort that we're doing with EOS votes is we want to have the most trusted tools on that side of, hey, if you want to use the wallet, use Greymass. If you want to use Scatter, use Scatter. Here's the actual documentation on how to do it. And we don't have BP logos all over it. Like we specifically put our best foot forward and say, we're not going to have EOS Tribe. We're not going to have Greymass logos. We're not going to have EOS Nation logos. We want to. There's a part of us that wants to, but we won't. because we know fundamentally that could create some voter bias. And I give props to Nathan James for that, because he stood up for this.
Right.
He was the leader in that thought, you know, and say, guys, you got to stop this shit. This is stupid. Like, stop it. Like, because then these other people don't promote each other's stuff because your logo's on it and you're ahead of them. Just remove that crap and just say it at the bar, like, or say it in a conversation. Don't put your stuff all over it. Like, at this phase, we need education. You know, and
every voting tool is going to look like a NASCAR.
You know, yeah, like I think, and we agreed, like me and Daniel and the EOS Canada guys, they're all super nice. It was a total Canadian standoff. It wasn't very fun. Oh, okay, hey, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'm like, isn't there going to be like, you know, because I'm used to, U.S. people are wily. Like, we don't, you know, you notice we don't get along. Like, we don't.
Right.
VPs like aren't super homies. Like, it's cool, but we buck heads. We have opinions. Like, we're not buddy about stuff. We have different views about stuff. And like, that's a cultural thing probably, you know, even regionally, like guys from Texas are a little more blunt, guys from more of the Midwest sensibility, or, you know, have you ever heard the term Midwest sensibility? Yeah, that's where that comes from. You know, they're a little more patient and observant, and then they make their move. And then the guys on the West Coast are a lot of flash, and you know what I mean, like wheelie dealy stuff. And the guys in New York are like, you know, Kevin and I mean, we see those cultures. You know what I mean? We see those cultures even in our own country. But for the most part, outside of Calgary, which is like the Texas of Canada, you know, hey, I give that to Saeed. He actually said that at the house at that big thing at Tulip. But I think that for the most part, you guys kind of have it together. Like, y'all get along. Canada and EOS Canada and EOS you know, Nation, pretty much, like, and even some of the other people from Canada that are in EOS trying to have a candidacy, pretty much get along about most stuff. That doesn't translate to collusion. You just try to spend your time like getting, you know, trying to fix stuff, basically, I think is where that comes from. But whereas we all want to have a position on it and, you know, be heard. So there's all these weird cultural differences that I'm seeing that are another part of it. And I think that at this time, like, removing bias from putting our logos on stuff and just putting our little minute cultural differences and perceptions of things like aside, and just saying, guys, we need to focus on the user right now, like really, really bad. And we need to think about PR. We we actually, even engineering types need to say, okay, I hate this crap. Because I'm a designer, like, I'm not super stoked about public relations stuff. Like, you know, whatever you want to think, like, here's a cool design, or here's a cool experience. I mean, you decide what it is, but I do have a background in that in advertising, and I do know there is a time where we take the reins and go, guys, like, whoa, we need to control this narrative a little better than we're doing. And all of us who are leaders in the community at different vantage points need to just have this conversation openly, record it, put it out on video, let people know what we're working on, explain it in more detail. With all of that said, Jesta, will you take just like, Aaron, will you take just even 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes to just kind of, one, say your perception of how it should go down, what you would like to see, but also what you think the issues are within the referendum? Because you have a lot of good insight on that, like probably the most potent of any submission, of any proposal that's been brought forward.
Well, thank you. I think the points you bring up are good, and I think there's a line that should be drawn in projects that we all engage in, and that line is going to be whether this is a VP initiative, like this is a branded initiative for, you know, that you're going to use to say this is why we're awesome, and then there's also the other stuff you're going to do that is this is for EOS. This in the end will not be a part of, like, yes, as either a block producer or an individual, you're going to be a part of that initiative for EOS. It's not for your candidacy, it's for EOS. Arguably any proposal like the referendum write-up I did, like whoever builds this stuff and whoever gets this implemented, it's not that it came from us, it's that, you know, we were a part of it, but that's not the meat of it. The meat of it is just making EOS good. It is evolving the system and making it better. Aside from the actual branding itself, the referendum system, it's going to be complicated if we don't have the support we need to build all the pieces. It's hard because there's like I've been in a situation with Steam and some of the other DPoS chains that I've been a part of them for so long, and there are no people out there writing plugins for these things. Like the plugins themselves are always built by the core teams, and that poses a problem here as well as in all the other blockchains. I think while the plugin that kind of architecture where we're doing smart contracts, we're doing plugins, we're doing web interfaces that then tweak or like integrate with wallets, like that's going to be the structure of a lot of things going forward that EOS will need, not a block producer, but like the entire system will need. So for us to be able to get a good handle on that entire process is going to be a huge win. I don't know whether that is like educational resources from those who know it best, which might be somebody from Block One or somebody from one of the other projects out there that has used this tech before. That doesn't help us in the short term because, delaying this training doesn't sound like a great option. I still have concerns with the off-chain tallying stuff. We have talked about it now, about being able to take snapshots, validate snapshots, do that kind of thing. That's a lot of effort. And I still am back and forth on whether that is going to be as easy as it sounds when we've talked about it, which is during the last call I was on with some of you. I was like, yes, I'd like to be in and visible on that process just because I want to make sure it can work. I don't want to stand in the way of it by any means. That's like the thing that we can get to the quickest is using snapshots and third-party kind of Oracle-like
It's
validation.
not ideal. It's not ideal, but
no.
I really like that Denny had architected it, and props to EOS Nation for this, that Denny had architected in a way where they're open sourcing a pretty big infrastructure piece and giving it away. So all the heavy lifting is done to like 8, 12, 15, 20 BPs who can actually like validate it for themselves. And then they have this tallying system in the short term. So if there's a result that's coming up over here that's different, there may even be, like you said, an oracle that pulls them all together and finds differences. And there's some level of decentralization even within that centralized infrastructure. I think that's the middle ground. It's not perfect, but in the short term, that's about all we have until we can get a plugin. And like like Daniel had pointed out, I mean, we need to ship something sooner rather than later. Some of this stuff truly is urgent.
Yeah.
So
it's like the foundation for us to move forward making decisions, like we can't even decide to pay somebody to build a plugin or train people to build plugins because we don't have the system to get that approved by the people who are supposed to be in charge. So
Did you want to talk about that, Daniel? Because I think our discussion on that in the group was relevant to like, well, hey, we'll include a multi-sig for the top 0.5 or 58 or 60 or whatever. So you can still have a say-so on what, the first referendum is. And the very first referendum should be, who do we give this over to?
Yeah, exactly. Right now, there's no mechanism to elect an alternate body to kind of manage this. So yeah, one of the, if not the first referendums we put forward could be, hey, let the token holders decide how do we control access to these proposals so that it's somewhat manageable, so that voters don't get fatigued by a million different referendums happening at the same time, and spam bots creating as many as they want.
That's an attack surface, because if you think about it, if you didn't want a referendum to go through and that was open, and it was something like, let's increase inflation from 1% to 1.5, and a lot of people on the worker proposal side who are, getting ready to rev up and vend, and then you're taking money out of that EOS.savings account, or other BPs that were like, let's have stricter compliance, and enforce the reg producer agreement. That's a potential, like if you open that up, especially in the early phases with these critical decisions,
right,
there's an easy way to dilute that and keep it from happening. And it's tough.
It should be open, in the end, but it's a matter of us like right now we're just talking about getting a way to get referendums moving. So restricting them is maybe a sacrifice that needs to be made. But
And see, you're a thorough DPoS guy, like Luke and Antiox and some of the dudes way up in it. Highly respect your opinion on this stuff, and even you. That was what was crazy to me. Freaking dude, Aaron Jesta didn't even fully understand the 2/3 plus one himself. It was like slightly new or different from what Dan had done. It was similar, but it was a little different. Even it eluded even him. That blew us away. We were like, well, we're new, but even when the OG dudes are like, wait, okay, all right, that should give everybody context. I made a mistake. I admit it again publicly. I was slightly alarmist, but you see me usually spaz out when there's like stuff that is not in the spirit of what we signed up for. That's the only reason that I ever like have a problem. You know, it did it with the file system and this, and over almost 5-6 months, that's all I've ever like really been flipping about, you know what I mean? Publicly, you can hardly blame me, you know, but it's cool. But that's why I try to have these discussions and like hear other smart people's opinions. Like, well, what do we do though? Like, how does that work? If you were going to explain it for like people who had no freaking idea what we were talking about, which I think is another part of the problem. We're talking about this stuff, but the average token holder has no freaking EOS.savings, like EOS.O account. What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean 2/3 plus one? Like, for people out there, it takes 2/3 plus one to basically pass a referendum into the system. If a referendum has been changed, like like I just talked about, like the Constitution, for example, and that had been a vetted change. It was a version that was going to be pushed directly, because it's all just code essentially, and then pushed into the system and changed. That actual change has to be ready for it to have teeth. And that was a point that Luke Stokes made that I none of us are talking about.
Yeah, it's very true.
Like, we have to define that. So like in the process that we're talking about, besides the PR layer, besides not being NASCAR with this voting initiative to educate people and dumb it down a little bit. So like, oh, okay, so this is just a place for me to like collaborate on policy, right? You know what I mean? And right? Like, and then an interface that makes that super easy to digest, you know, and it's all in one place, like the work proposal system, referendum, forum, and maybe like a vetted proxy vote system of like the people Thomas has been trying to find that are top notch, not just BPs creating a proxy for themselves, but like independent kind of compliant oriented people, right? So if we had that in one place, then that's like a place for us to strive to do better for all of us. That's a lighthouse, you know what I mean? But within that, like, what is the process? Like, how do we define what gets submitted? Like, because it's really hard to tell the average public that, oh yeah, so you have to actually submit the code for public review before this gets approved to even be voted on. You know what I mean?
It's a tall order.
I mean, that I don't know if everyone's going to be they're going to like that, like at first, but it's real. Like, that is a legitimate concern. Have you witnessed that in the Steam community at all? Like, where people suggested changes and had these big uproars, but didn't really have any teeth or anything?
That's sadly a lot of that environment. It's a different story, and we don't necessarily have to get into that on this.
Not the nuts and bolts, but just I'm one, because that is the closest brother of what we're doing now that we have.
Yeah,
so we do ask for some insights from you and Luke and Antiox and other people who are looking at coming over to this side, like, oh, this has a lot of potential, but how can we not screw it up like it was done over there to some extent? The dysfunction, the bad token distribution, all these things that have plagued that chain. Like, in your wisdom, Aaron, like, what could you impart on the audience and just anyone who looks at this later, months from now, as a reference point? And it's okay. You can be informal. That's like specifically what this is for. Just say it like it is.
Cool. I think having, like you said, the teeth for proposals, I don't know if that's necessary, but it would avoid a lot of frustration. I can say from my personal experience, I've written proposals that are just as big and important, in my opinion, as the referendum stuff, that, like the proposal I put out for this. And they have been ignored. Like, there's, I personally don't have the full capabilities to deliver 100% on these projects, but there was no way to pull the resources together to actually do it. So it's like there are a number, and not just me, there's a lot of people I've witnessed this happen to, that have proposed really great ideas that just never get traction. Like they can't get support to do it, or they can't find the right people to do it, or anything in that regard. So it just creates this stagnation that really sours people.
Why do you think that is? Because like I know Luke was going to hire OCI. It seems like some of this stuff is an actual engineering feat and requires some pretty serious chops to even implement at like Dan's level or better even. And that's part of that barrier to entry to get it done. Is that the case, or?
Yeah, and even in the Steam world, like as a Steam or any of the other DPoS blockchains, I'll just say Steam primarily because Steam is one of the bigger one. It is the bigger one. All the other ones are very little, but there's no funding. Like within EOS and the block producers here, we do have access to both a worker pool, hopefully someday soon, and we also have our own individual rewards, which are great enough to let us kind of reach out to companies like OCI and hire professional help. Steam and all of the others, like you don't have that flexibility because you don't have the funding. Like you can't take half a year's worth of witness rewards to get one small initiative done. Like it just like the numbers just don't line up.
Yeah.
So
but now with $1 million a day going to the worker proposal fund, this is like a whole new ball game.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Hopefully that will help. We could fund the development of proposals.
Yeah.
Give them teeth.
That is brilliant. That's actually brilliant, where the things that they're actually proposing are vetted use cases of, because which came first, the chicken or the egg? Right. In the same way that I mentioned Luke suggesting that this stuff has to have teeth. Well, if something's a huge engineering feat and you have to do that before you can propose it, how does that work? So you just literally touched on how we could unlock the chain and the progress of the chain. That is a brilliant idea. Thank you, Daniel. That is literally, we could fund the development of proposals.
Yeah.
Like teams that are like, hey, these guys have the chops. OCI has the chops. Greymass has the chops. They've got a few guys they've got on staff. Like whatever. Let's give them a budget, and then there's all these conflicts within the discussions, like I was saying in the worker proposal system, that BPs can't be a part of that. And I think that's complete and utter, horsehooey, because that's not in the best interest of the chain. People need to understand that just because we might be friendly to each other, we fiercely, like if you're a part of anyone that I've met in the top 50, likes their independence. Like they don't want to be part of this big conglomerate or anything. They want to be small and lean and scrappy and like do what they want to do and push their individual like ethos and agendas and stuff, and not have to be tied up in these big like networks and like you see from mining conglomerates and other stuff. They don't want, that you're subservient to a mining pool. It's like we like that our voice is heard. We don't always get along, and we're independent regionally, nationally, internationally by design. And that we are not always going to see eye to eye. Me and, just so everyone knows, for full transparency, me and Daniel kind of butted heads. Me and now we're talking and it's cool, but we didn't initially get along on some things. Like we realized that we wanted the same thing, but we had different vantage points that we thought to get there. And now that we had all talked, we're like, actually, each of us has a component to that, and that's DPoS. That's the spirit of DPoS, because you remain you keep your independence. But you realize, you humble yourself and go, wow, like I don't have all this figured out. Like I've got about a third or a fifth of it, but I need these other 2 or 3 guys to actually even get it to a point where we can change anything. So you have to make it work and come to a consensus. And that's, I don't know, I think that's a beautiful thing. That's where I agree with Luke heavily about his whole, like, this isn't supposed to be pretty, this is supposed to be a hot mess. And like, we're supposed to like buck heads, but whether you're a key player and you really have the chops will greatly depend.
I gotta chime in, man. Chime in.
Cool.
I've been hearing people complain bitterly on Telegram. It's like, we're reinventing the HOA. This is all becoming political. Like, what did you think a governed blockchain was? What did you imagine we were creating all this time? Have you not been reading the white papers? Have you not been paying attention? Yes, yes, because the alternative to an HOA is the parity wallet, and your $300 million is locked up in Ethereum to the end of time. So yes, it's this or that pick. Anyway, sorry, I had to jump in.
No, I agree.
Yep. And
the wisdom of Thomas Cox. Thomas Cox, the governance expert.
Thank you. Steve is going to do all my audio intros and outros from now on.
I just need effects. So.
Hey, I can get back to my dinner party, but you guys got to wave. You got Dave Moss here. You got Corey Lederer. You may or may not know Mr. Infrastructure.
StrongBlock.
And our friend Bree. So love to all of you from all of us, and I'm going to be a better dinner companion now.
All right, take it easy, Thomas. God bless. Cool. He had to chime in on that. I think that, like, I agree with Dan's code is sort of law, and I agree with Thomas. And just like what I said, it's kind of in the middle. It's a little bit of what he says, but not all of it, because Thomas isn't right 100%. He is, things could be adjusted from the extreme that he's saying. But if you really look at what Dan is saying, it's kind of like what Luke was saying, is that, well, what are we proposing? What are we approving? This all has to be done on chain and like in contracts. Like, it's not just like some ephemeral idealistic idea of what this has to be. Like, we have to define that. And we can't create fiefdoms, in that process. So this is tough. Like you said, I mean, this is a governed blockchain, and it sucks sometimes. It takes up a lot of our time. It's very stressful. It's time consuming. I know Daniel still, has a job he works at, and he does this in all of his spare time. I mean, day and night. You're working 16-hour days yourself a lot of the time, and still patient. Whereas some of us in the U.S. like lose our shit sometimes, and we might cuss a few times. Never cusses once. Is always straight face, smiling, like the consummate project manager. There's the scrum master. Like thank you, because we need more people like that in this process. You can see certainly why Trudeau has done well and is looked at as like we need more Trudeaus and less Trumps. But actually even that we need a little bit of the middle. We need someone to be able to say something and be assertive, but at the same time be pragmatic, and that we're kind of learning each other from each other, and both, like I said, nationally and internationally. That's what I'm seeing happening, is like we're all like realizing different trades and crafts and careers that we've all had are converging right now in the industry, but also like we're learning a lot of this from each other. So anyways, Aaron, are you there?
Yep. Sorry.
So I'll shut up, but could you extend on like what the difference of the plugin and the approach that Aaron in the approach that Alexander had from EOS Canada, and his approach versus like your approach to like a high level for people that look into these? Well, what's the difference? Why are you creating this module versus the way that they're doing it?
Right. I think the biggest difference is if we want to build a system that can really keep track of like a proposal and whether it's maintained approval for a set amount of time, doing it on a snapshot basis is just a representation of that. It's not a true, like, it could fall above and below, and like it could waver up and between approval and disapproval between the snapshots, and the snapshots won't represent that fluctuation. So it really depends on whether that technically meets the requirements. Being able to replay and stop the blockchain and then take a snapshot, it's a great approach. It's complicated. It's going to be work for everybody that wants to verify it. Whereas like what we're trying to do is what plugins were designed for. The plugins are basically little attachments into the blockchain that as the blockchain parses blocks, it does things. So we can have in every block validation that something is legit, that a referendum is being approved block by block. which is just something like if we want of detail, we have to go to a plugin. If we, and by we, I mean the community and all of the stakeholders within EOS, if that community accepts that snapshots are going to be good enough to begin with, then this is, the way that we're exploring and trying to do it right now will be good enough. But there will still be some of them out there that somebody's going to complain that they're going to point at things I'm pointing out right now and say, well, it fell under for an hour between those 10,000 blocks, and this referendum's not valid because it wasn't valid for 30 days or whatever the time frame is. So it's about quelling all those people with all their nitpicky concerns, really. Valid, but it comes down to how technical you get into it. And
you were the first technical person or engineer that actually agreed 100% that we have a PR problem and how it's perceived. We need to be proactive and talking about this publicly, solicit feedback. Daniel aligned more on just the overall user experience and just simplifying it. But no one really, you're the first person to go, hell yeah, this is a total PR debacle. People are going to be pissed if we don't talk about this and are super overly transparent about it. And they put out these regular talks once a week, all the recordings we have, put out proposals, debate it. Did you want to extend on that, Daniel? Because Daniel, for those out there, has been the scrum master on the project and has been kind of the glue trying to keep it all together. And you haven't really extended on your whole perception of how it should go down.
In terms of the PR, I agree. And I thank you for doing this. I think it's great that we're, bringing in the conversation. Part of it you alluded to, all of us working 16 hours, trying to wrap our heads around this problem ourselves and not being as open publicly as we should be. But I think we're getting to a point now where I'm more comfortable. Okay, I understand the problem better than I did even a few days ago.
Right.
I'm able to talk about it more coherently. I'm
okay with stumbling like that. I'm okay with being look, this is what I think the problem is. Freaking correct me if I'm wrong. And I was right on a lot of it. A few of them I wasn't. And I'm just sometimes I think that's okay because that fleshes out. People are quicker to say, oh, you're an idiot and don't understand this than actually, because they want to position and be the most knowledgeable sometimes. No, not pointing the fingers at anybody, but I think we know a few people in the ecosystem that can be like that sometimes. And that I think is toxic. So you need UX and growth people to come in and poke and say, hey, what is this? That have a little personality and might because, I'm not always likable, but overall I'm a person that does get people to pay attention. And that's all I'm trying to use those strengths to say, hey, I'm not the best engineer. I'm a mediocre front engineer at best. I'm a good designer, but I'm not the greatest. There's guys who'll smoke me, you know what I mean? In this ecosystem, that's another thing. People out there need to understand we have some of the most brilliant engineers in EOS. No one knows this. This space has ever seen. I mean, serious business. This is different. That's where some serious adoption is probably going to start happening in the next 3 to 5 years because these aren't skeevy, stoners, you know what I mean? Running a node in their mom's basement. These are legit startup and entrepreneurs or real serious engineers who go make $250,000 easy in the Valley or wherever and are putting their time into this. So people out there need to understand that. What do you do for a living before this? I mean, what do you still do for a living, Daniel?
It's a process management, product management in a financial technology company, digital messaging. I've been doing that for a while, and I've been blown away as well by the talent. It's just it's crazy the skills we've got here, jumping on people just volunteering to try to create something great for the community.
Yeah, hey, this is Dominic Thomas. I wasn't going to get on video, but I
on video.
Some of the other guys. I'm sorry, I can't right now.
We're not going to get okay.
It'll be
It's
terrible.
probably froed out like.
No, it's not. It's not vain. It's bandwidth.
Oh,
It'll just be choppy and awful. But I've been working on the WPS with the sort of Thomas and about 8 or 9 of us. I mean, there's a whole group there that I don't think a lot of people are aware of. We're putting in probably 15 hours a week a piece for 4 months now, and there's some serious thought out stuff. So I'm glad to be on this call to see what's going on with the referendum, because that's sort of the key that unlocks everything. But what I think keeps getting lost in decentralization that just drives me insane in blockchain is that, decentralization's easy when all you need to do is run a node or a miner. Code is law. It's very straightforward. But when you're building something like we're building, you need some sort of centralized starting point. You need things in place that are going to relieve people of that power rapidly, without a doubt. But where I think Block One let us down substantially is not giving us some starting points. And that's what's really making it hard on everybody, is we're trying to come to consensus on things like how to vote on a starting point. That's really hard to do. And we've struggled with this in the worker proposal system thing for months. How do we get consensus so people are okay with the 10,000 hours worth of work that we've put into what we have and all the thinking, and all we're asking is that people use our process to decide on who they want to do this. And that's how much energy's just gone into that. Like, to try to create something that the community will feel good about, that we're not just co-opting and putting our agendas forth as individuals or whatever. And I agree with you, Steve. There's brilliant people here, and you're aware of my project. We're bringing an entire sort of fintech fork to this thing, but we're airdropping.
Verbally, yeah.
We're airdropping the whole community as a process because we're blockchain people, and we want everybody to share in that. And we have serious interest. We've got investment banks contacting us with what we're doing. They're only starting to understand what EOS is, and that's been a challenge in fundraising. I won't divert, but they can't wrap their minds around what EOS is, even at a technical
level. A few people can, you know what I mean? But you would agree that having a free market approach to some of these systems that are popping up, like arbitration and and worker proposal systems, and not limiting BPs from taking part of that as long as they meet compliance and there's no conflict of interest, is in the best interest of the chain. That's the general 60%. There's the 40% that don't think that, but it seems like that narrative is starting to win. Like Dan had said, this should all just be whoever wants to be an arbitrator and can get the data. It should be like a mechanism, a reporting mechanism that just gives you, was this hacked or not? And once it's confirmed, you can go to the police or some arbitration form of your choosing. It's not this huge fiefdom, and the same for the worker proposal system. There's not these one groups that define all of it. And that's where I don't agree with Thomas. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Thomas wants to have the centralized approach because he's an IBM guy. And, that's just my opinion. Not hating on Thomas. I'm just saying that I think guys who come from that world think that way because they've been in that industry 20, 30 years of their career, and that's what they know. Whereas the majority of people that actually create value in the global economy are small to mid-sized business. Numbers don't lie. So those of us who have built small to mid-sized businesses or startups legitimately, have done that on paper, have a very different view that you have to let the free market decide that stuff. And, I don't know. I just disagree with the fiefdoms that I see starting to happen on both sides, because even if we create this system and we can come to a consensus, what happens when ECAF is the only global forum that can make any decision on chain? EMAC has to answer to them, and at the same time, the majority of worker proposals have to be filtered through this one organization. That's not a good idea. There should be competing organizations, and I hear you rallying that, saying, guys, it's okay to have 2 or 3 or some vetted organizations, but there has to be multiple ones. You can't just have one group that decides who gets through the worker proposal system, or whatever.
No, I completely agree. And I think the other challenge is I'm just saying that someone's got to get it started. We have to have something to start with. And the other thing I see is that we're seeking perfection way too soon. One of the things I put forth in that group was look, let's just get something out there, get it to the community, and then just put a cap on it. Like, we're only going to spend $1 million worth of funds on the front end and see what mistakes get made. Like, mistakes are going to be made, guys. We're stalling trying to create these perfect systems that nobody can game. You can't even possibly conceive.
You can't create a
how
perfect
people are
system
going to game
in the real world. Like, you can't create a perfect system in the real world. So what do we think is going to be perfect here?
Yeah, and that's what I mean. We keep stalling in the WPS, and I just keep championing the thing of like, guys, stop trying to be perfect. I know you guys have read all these like insane books. I have a poli-sci degree too. I know all the political theory, but it's bullshit. There's 300,000 addresses. Like, we don't even know what kind of clowns are going to come out of the woodwork to attack this thing. Let's just put in processes that deal with mistakes instead of perfect systems. How do we deal with mistakes quickly?
That's the foundation. Like,
the collusion thing with the block producers, I'm tired of hearing that. I'm like, you've got this group of people that spent months and months and months trying to build this damn thing, and now all of a sudden they're the devil, when at the last minute, like, 4 exchanges came in and just pretty much gamed the shit out of the system, and no one even hardly flinched. I mean, not in my opinion, not as strongly as it should have, but like, whatever. Okay, they did. Now let's fix it. They got some block rewards. I'm sorry that some people I know worked really hard.
Most people are worried about the culture that brings, though. It's not so much that, like, I really care that, like, a mining operation or exchange is a block producer. It's just that they bring that perception and culture and approach to the ecosystem. And that if that's not, as it was said, adhering to social norms, then there is a RMV producer function to fork them out and get rid of them.
Right. That's all I'm saying. Like, stop bitching and just, if it's not cool, let's deal with it. But it's fine.
Now there's a 7 to now we can't do a 2/3 majority if you're reading Gov right now. Now that's the other thing. We've talked about the worker proposal system. We've talked about, what do you guys think about this shitstorm that's being said, excuse my language, in the governance right now, accusing some people of sharing votes and actually proving that on chain right now. I don't know. I haven't seen enough data, but I just wanted to see if you guys had seen that yet. What you're thinking.
I don't know. I expected it. I assumed it. I knew once the voting went down when it was going to be run by whales. I've been a huge vocal proponent that stake-weighted voting doesn't work. Just doesn't work. Elites always protect their own interests, and their interests are never entirely aligned with the community because capital can move. Capital can move. They can trash this entire blockchain and move on to the next project. They may lose some money in that process, but the risk of losing money as opposed to the potential gains of gaming and owning a system to perpetuate their wealth are just greater. And it's a calculable risk. And when all you're going to lose is capital, you're not going to lose your livelihood. You're not going to lose, so many other things that regular people put at risk when they, I just never expected stake-weighted voting to play out in the interest of the community. I thought that was insanity. That's like trickle-down economics. It just doesn't work, But
yeah, I mean, what do you think about that, Aaron? Because you've seen this stuff from every angle over on Steemit, like from the good old days at the very beginning, and that is the closest DPoS system next to maybe BitShares, based on graphene for us to even have any reference. Like, what are your thoughts on all that? Not who did it. I don't want to attack anyone because we need to look at the data before we make an assumption, but just that could be happening.
I feel like it's more likely to be happening in the beginning phases of something like this. Really early days Steam, it was my perception. I really started getting involved in DPoS when Steam was really early on. That was kind of when I took my deep dive. But the perception of Steam at that time was that it was all just a bunch of BitShares guys that were kind of legacy and brought over, and there was a lot of drama around voting and anonymous whales who were promoting just weird people into block producer positions. But I will say that it's improved over time. Like, I have witnessed a number of people. Steam's different in that each witness is an individual, as opposed to this EOS ecosystem where everybody's basically in an organization, which is really impressive in and of itself. But there are instances in Steam now where you'll see an individual come in and they'll work hard and they'll contribute to the community, and then they will climb up the ranks, and it's great to see. It's showing that the system does work to a degree. It is stake weighted. It is still kind of abused to some degree, but it has improved over time slightly. If I were to go through like the top producers on Steam right now and point them out and kind of talk about each one, like there are very few that I would have a little to say about. I would say 3/4 of them are good candidates, and there's a handful that might not be. But it used to be that ratio used to be a lot worse. If we start talking about some of the other DPS or DPoS chains, it's a lot worse. I know of a couple where like one person owns like 8 of the top 30 something. Like you can tell because when one of them goes down, they all go down. And there's just there's no community around those smaller chains that revolts against this. I bet most of the stakeholders don't even know it's occurring because, there's literally no visibility on that project for most people. I think EOS will get a little better over time. It is right to say that stake-weighted voting isn't the best. It's not perfect. But out of the years that I've watched Steam now, I've read probably hundreds of posts on this of people trying to come up with a better solution, and I don't think anybody's come up with a better solution yet. It's still.
Do you think the math behind it could actually, like some people had said, voting should be weighted to taper off at a certain point, that could actually have other implications as well that would be just as bad?
They would just end up creating more anonymous accounts. I mean, that's vulnerable to Sybil attacks, and that, there are a lot of small ideas that could work. If we could have like true verification of who you are before you voted, so that way it is really a one person, one vote kind of populist world population vote, that would be cool. But you see initiatives in that happening even within EOS and then outside of EOS with things like Civic and other identity-based blockchains, but none of that's ready yet as far as I know. I mean,
so like if you could tie and you had, IBC, inter-blockchain communication, to actually go out and get a proof from somewhere of your identity before the account had approval for voting, that actually could be some type of mechanism to weed that out at least a little bit. But we don't have that stuff.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't exist, and anything that does can be faked. So we're kind of stuck with it until somebody comes up with something better. I would love to see proposals of how it could be better.
And I mean, I've seen that some people have, seen some of the posts that you're talking about, that like, well, we could do it like this and we could do it like this and make this more fair. And it's like, Luke said, DPoS isn't a democracy. It's, I've said it's a pseudo-democratic, it's a pseudo-democratic aristocracy at best.
Yeah.
And that we have to accept that it is not a perfect system, but that's kind of like the system we're in now.
Yeah. I think what's happening right now in the community with like the outrage on Reddit or the posts talking about all these unknown block producers and just the drama that's being drummed up about things that should just be not acceptable, I think it counters the whale's interest in wanting to just kind of elect them to position, because that drama is going to make the value of the token go down. So they really should be voting not for themselves to make themselves more money. They should be voting for going to raise the public perception of EOS as a whole, which is better than them earning more tokens. Right. It'll be the value going up because, everybody will be happy. Well, not everyone, but.
Yeah, they have literally staked to see the value of EOS increase. So to sabotage that doesn't make a lot of sense economically. And totally agree that, over time, I think we're going to see things improve. Like right now, what do we have? Only 30% of tokens have voted. A lot of the people I talk to, in the meetups I've been hosting in Toronto, the majority, the average token holder, they haven't even touched their tokens yet. They're still, they don't even know how to get it off an exchange yet. They don't trust the wallets yet. It's going to take time for the space to mature a little bit more before the average token holder really starts getting involved and throwing their tokens around. And I think when that happens, we're going to see, I guess a little more dispersed voting and hopefully an improvement in who we see getting elected.
Danny couldn't be here on this call he was going to, but he's out partying, eating poutine, and drinking ice wine with EOS Canada right now.
That's right. Yeah, they've been sending me pictures of their...
listening to French jazz music. Like, with Alexander. Hey, guys. Oui. No, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. We love the French. It's all a shame.
Yeah, I saw a picture. They're at the bar, and Alexandre's got his laptop out. He's showing them the code. everyone's just riveted. It's like they're at a bar and they're all staring
at the code. Look. Hey, let's get it. Like, I want to say this publicly. It's no secret that me and Alexandra particularly don't get along all the time. We're like, I'm the typical like designer, creative UX person, and he's the typical engineer that just, we've seen it in production. We know what it is, like just different strong personalities, but I have the utmost respect for what the dude does. You know what I mean? As I'm sure, and he said equal with me, we just sometimes don't get along, and that's okay. We're not supposed to all the time. Yep. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. But if we focus on bringing the best out of each other and not the worst, and can find that middle ground, I mean, that's what will make this thing work. So it's good to have different viewpoints. That gets us, I think everybody could agree that the engineering dominated culture is kind of like, in Texas, there's a saying for that, but I won't be crass, but it's basically you trip on your own,
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you get a little ahead of yourself sometimes and don't realize like you don't know what you don't know. And there's engineering hurdles that I don't understand, that he deeply understands, that he brings to the table, and other engineers like him. And there's other like user-centered kind of things and growth and PR things that maybe I look at that aren't as important to him, because, hey, what does any of that matter if like the freaking code doesn't work? So both are right, but it's like, how do we find a middle ground of respect and just try to put our best foot forward and like execute on projects, not play games, not try to create other smaller little secret groups and little discussions and stuff, but just keep it all out in the open and just say, hey, this is how I feel. This is how I think it should be done. Like, how can we make this happen? And you saw that. Go ahead.
And that goes right back to what we were just talking about, how, so many token holders right now haven't even voted because the user experience just isn't there yet. And if we're going to,
some of the code isn't there. Like, that's legitimately the concern of some of the engineers.
Yeah.
Some of the code isn't even there yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
so for it to succeed, engineering is a big part of it, but you can't, engineering alone is not going to make this chain work. You need a user experience that makes sense, that attracts people to come, and makes the average person wanting to interact with this chain.
And that's why I really, go ahead.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's why I liked when Aaron came in that discussion, it was like perfect timing, because he has some user experience. He may not be like this crazy designer. He can design some stuff, but he's more focused on the engineering side, but he understands user experience. His user experience flow was in his proposal. And I was like, finally, someone kind of in the middle, that like can bring some sanity to this. Cause it's like, that's what we need. We need to be hyper aware of ourselves, both in public criticisms and the user experience and the journey maps that we need to create to understand the user stories of how these people are interfacing with this stuff, and find those pain points, and then also have a mind for how it's going to be perceived that we overlook that stuff. You know what I mean? And that's freaking hard. I mean, it's hard for enterprises to do that stuff.
Hi, I wanted to talk. I'm Stuart from EOS Meso, and we've been building this EOS Constitution.io. This is a GUI, a graphic user interface for the forum that you've been talking about. And I wanted to share the idea that, like you said before, well, I like the idea of the system for the referendum to be built in layers, like the smart contract that stores everything in the chain is one thing, but it can be consumed by different tools, by different clients. And we're building this EOSconstitution.io that is a forum that stores everything in the chain. And like you said before, we are building and releasing it. I like the phrase that Linus Torvalds says about release soon, release often. And we're gonna screw it a lot of times, and it's not gonna be perfect the first time. But the idea is that it's one client for the EOS forum, and there can be many. And the user, like there are different voting portals. We can have different.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Like, I completely agree. Aaron agrees. Daniel, everyone agrees on that side that we need 20, 30 different portals with different takes, different approaches that appease different users. But within that, in these early phases, we need to create a lighthouse. This is the biggest problem in this stuff. Is we saw this in Steemit, we saw this in BitShares. When there's 20 different interfaces and no one actually explained what the interface was for to begin with, the users don't know what the hell it is. So before everybody rushes out and say, hey, look at my tool, look at my tool, look at my tool, vote for me, we need to stop as a community and do what we did with EOS Portal. And all the heavy hitters completely agree with that. So if you guys want to solve a real user problem here, we need to like put all of our time and efforts into deep, simplified education, simplified interface that just pulls the actual governance layer out. That isn't just this all-encompassing, all-in-one tool, but it's also not just a micro tool. It's like, here's the 3 or 4 areas, just like my proposal, just like I said, a user-centered design approach to EOS voting. You know, go read that post, think about it, think about the things I'm saying, and all of you out there in the BP ecosystem, you know, come together like we did on the EOS portal project and watch what happens. Then people will start using your portal more because they'll have a preference or affinity to this problem you're solving. They'll know, oh, well, I don't want to mess with all that other stuff. I don't care about the work proposal. Oh, this is just the Constitution. Like, that's the stuff I care about. Or, oh, this is the you know what I mean, Jesta or Aaron, the kind of, you know, you can break that out into the things that people, the individual users or your base cares about. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you should be able to use like whatever fits the needs that you have. I mean, we've been working on a tool that does certain things, and I have been just drooling and following along with scatter work because I know that that's going to be perfect for so many other use cases and different scenarios and different people. And the more tools we have that, you know, connect all together, the more amazing this entire ecosystem will end up being.
No, absolutely. So no one is in disagreement with having, we want many different tools, many different ways to tally, many different ways to present the information and the votes. But in this proto early phase, we need to put a big spotlight because like no one even knew to vote when the chain was about to launch. Like that rush that you saw with like NS James, myself, Eric, you know, Caesar to do EOS Portal. I had this, just for full transparency, we had this whole dynamic where, you know, people wanted to put their logo on it. And it was like, you know, that had to be shut down because it's like, look guys, like if we put that first, if we just come out with our own branded tools, there's going to be 15 different ways of doing it. And no offense, but half of you engineers are not even documenting it correctly. We need to get comms people on this, UX people on this, and like come up with a strategy to do this at more of a like high level so it can bring everyone together on, oh, we need to vote to unlock the chain or I don't get my tokens, right? So there was a use case there. They could say, oh, I have to use this. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like the same thing with the referendum and the worker proposal system. We need to educate them on why these systems are so critical. If we unlock the budgets for the chain, people start getting funding to improve the chain, which improves your money. Your token is worth more. You know what I'm saying? And that has to be like talked about, you know, and something has to be said about that. I don't think that whales, looking at the old Unity stuff that happened with BitShares and them just voting against worker proposals because they didn't want it to dump, you know, that much to come out, you know, and dump on the market. They wanted to pump the price. Or at least that's what people were saying. I don't know that that is true. People had on-chain references to that, and that was a big stink in the forums. But I think there might be similar. We're thinking whales are going to position their vendors. They don't want that thing to be locked up because it's going to keep the token price at an average at about an $8 to $12, maybe $15 average versus $30, $50 because it's all being staked and locked up, and then there's nothing coming out of the inflation. So the longer that they can keep that over time, especially during a lot of big releases and killer dApps that are coming out, you could certainly see where the game theory of that, where it's not in their interest to like unlock those funds. They want to stifle it. They want to, you would think, you know, in the past, that's what's happened in DPoS stuff. Are they going to do that? Is there validity there? I don't know. I have no idea. I guess we'll certainly see. I think they should increase the inflation paid out to block producers, and not just because I'm a block producer, but because we have these really killer standbys that are not getting paid, that even if they're just making 100 tokens a day or something, you know what I mean? And we took 1.25% and then 3.25% for the worker proposal system. You know what I mean? Like in an EOS.savings account, that's still like $750,000 a day or something. You know what I mean? It's plenty of money. And then you can spread out. No one in the top 21 has to take less rewards. You just spread that out a little more to keep those really solid nodes. Because what happens if they did have a big regional attack and took out everybody in Beijing and a bunch of people in US and some people in Europe, and the replacement sucked? Or it couldn't even, couldn't even like update there's some actual threat there. But when you've got 120, 21 geographically distributed, it's really hard to get into these different, these different countries and to get all the legality, the legal hurdles to get into each of these different like countries and actually get an order to come after these people. I mean, that's hard. It's a big legal quagmire to do that. So it's not like people try to liken DPoS as centralized. It's like, yeah, take out all 21 of the top people and the next 21 will replace them. If you have a strong network and good people, we don't need to lose these engineers. There are some super smart people. And I think that is one thing that I'd like to see more talked about, because if you lost number like 70 guys like Rob Rigo from EOS Detroit, shout out, love those guys. And they need to be up in the mix, even if they're number 54 or number 42 or number 20, or number 4, whatever. It's all going to be very volatile and mix up, but we cannot lose some of these guys. Like that needs to be another component, because if we had that, the network's stronger for it. These whales investment is actually stronger for doing that. And hey, if the big concern is that this inflation is going to dump out on the market and devalue the coin, you look at the game theory of it, like, as tokens are locked up more and more in the network, inflation balances that so it doesn't hyperinflate. I mean, that's basic economics, but if you lock up both, then it will. You start locking up 60% of the chain and people just forget about their vote and don't reassert it. And then, you know what I mean? And then none of the EOS.savings, you're only getting 1%. And that's most of even the BPs are holding it to dump when it pumps, expecting that. Then that's not good either. You know what I mean? It should be like a slow rise and predictable rise. It's not too volatile. It may go down $2 or $3. It may go up $2 or $3, but it's pretty predictable. I think Steemit's a good example of that. It still always has been 75 cents to $1.50, $2. It's never gone too much up. It's never gone too much down. It pumped up to $10, at one point. I'm sure you guys were loving that. Like that's
Yep. It was also down to 20 cents for quite a while. So yeah, that was scary.
What do you think happened? Like, what is your economic
It was
theory?
the markets. That was late 2015, early 2016, or is that the right years?
I think it was late 2016, early 2017.
Maybe it was about a year before the last bull run we saw at the end of 2017. So yeah, it was late 2016. It was just the markets. I mean, we saw Bitcoin was probably like 600-700 at that point. So everything was much lower back then. But now that everything is much higher, we're seeing this fairly steady $1 to $2, which is nice. So
some prediction, what is it, like 90,000 tokens a month that are paid out for top? Is it at a scale or 9,000 tokens a month? Is that what
it is? Everybody in the top 21 gets the same amount, and then there is, or everybody, maybe it's top 20, and then everybody below that rotates into the 21st spot. So it is, when you fall out of the top 20 in Steam, it is a drastic drop. EOS, on the other hand, with the way that it skews based on votes, the vote pool, like that was a brilliant improvement. I think a lot of the other chains should take on, because it's like the minute you're in like 22nd or 23rd on Steam, it's really encouraging, because you're maybe getting 30 or 40 Steam a day, maybe, and that's kind of the high end. Whereas, with the way that EOS distributes votes per vote, it makes it a little bit more fair.
So the vote weighting is actually part of your payout dynamically. And do you know exactly what a description for non-technical people who look at this like months from now, how that kind of works in the new system versus the old system? Because I think there's a lot of what's happening is there is a wave of fans from Steemit that are coming on, basically trying to better understand.
Yeah, and I am one of those navigating those treacherous waters, but it's not by vote weight unless you're out of the top 21, I think is the best way to put it. And then as soon as you're in the top, it's static. It is a standard amount that you get. It's like 246 blocks a day, or 246 Steam a day. So whether you're first or 20th.
Interesting.
Whereas with EOS, the person in first, well, in EOS with the person in first versus the person in 21st, they all get 360, 320, something like that per day. But then they also get distribution based on the percentage of vote. So, the person in first actually does earn a lot more than the person in 20th.
And you think that that's more sustainable in payout structure than what you're seeing in Steemit? Because if you're in, what do you get exactly? Like, what's the token payout per day if you're in the top 21 versus like 22?
22 is probably like 30 to 50, somewhere in that range. And everybody in the top 20 is 240-ish, 250-ish.
That's pretty drastic.
Yeah.
There's a lot of incentive.
The way that the per vote, like the percentage vote per BP here on EOS works, honestly, that might be the only system we need. Like, I don't know why there's necessarily, like, sure, the top 20 in EOS or 21 can be block producers, but maybe the entire system is by vote, like,
yeah.
I don't know if it is determined that it's more fair to do it by what percentage of the network supports you, then you could go all that route. But I'm sure there was a good reason to mix it that I haven't read. So I'm willing to, I'm interested to see how it plays out here in EOS. It's a cool system.
Because I've noticed that like, they'll get, I think like EOS Nation's a good example. What is it? Will you chime in real quick, Daniel? Like you guys are like number 22 now. And
yeah, last I checked, we're 22, and we've been kind of, the last couple of days, we've managed to flutter into that 21 spot for, maybe a few hours at a time, and then we're back at 22.
And it's kind of relevant to how many votes you get, because I see you guys getting like almost 400 tokens, 420, and then like 380. It was weird. Like, it wasn't a set amount in the rewards. And even though we're number like 29 or 30 or 31 in Flux, we're still getting comparable to our vote weight, it seems like. So that's more or less like, and I understood that, but I'm like seeing it in application. It's very interesting that solves the problem of creating a really strong network of backups that are ready to go. I just think that should have been the original 121. Even if a guy at number 120, 119 got 80 to 100 tokens, it's still enough to run a node and like maybe be there in case the top like 50 just got taken out for some reason or something happened, some catastrophic change that happened. It would, I don't know how you feel about that. Me and you probably are not technical enough on the network side, but I think Aaron probably understands that wholly better, being a witness himself. Like, would you agree with that? Because that's most of what the people in the 40 to like 90 crowd is saying. What I'm echoing is we want that back. Like that's the biggest thing that they want changed.
I think from the engineering side of things, I think that if the top chunk were to get knocked out right now, I don't think the backups would automatically flip in to, like, the network wouldn't just automatically fail over to them, which is a problem. And that might be the problem that's getting more attention than, making sure that there's healthier list of backups, just because the backups, so I don't know if the kind of recovery options that backups provide are even fully implemented at this point. So
you don't know that would necessarily mean a stronger network.
Yeah, at this point.
The vetting process of even getting voted in that top 50, 0.5% range, if you have campaigned enough, if you've created enough value for even the whales or the people with the stake to have voted you in or considered you as a brand in the ecosystem, is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy to some extent, and that weeds out the chaff, so to speak. Like,
yeah,
if you did that, you might have a lot of people collecting inflation. That was the other side of that argument. That if you had that, then you would have people who might just be running dummy nodes or stuff that's just taking inflation from the network and then collecting and dumping and lowering the price, all kinds of other bad things that could happen from that too. So what we're seeing is kind of a balance. So that cutoff point was a cutoff point.
Mm-hmm.
That's
and
what
the sad thing is we have, like was mentioned earlier, there's so much talent in this space that I think all of us have the desire to make sure that isn't lost. And that is one solution to that, to make sure that we can keep these people engaged and rewarded enough to be spending their time improving this for all of us. Like, so
I think that's worth it.
But have been built by backup block producers. The Greymass is a perfect example. You guys are now in the top 21, right? Or are you?
Not to my knowledge. We haven't been in maybe a week or so. Okay. We spent a couple days in there.
Yeah. So, but
it must be nice. We've never felt that before. We hope one day you just feel it. What does it feel like?
There's an emoji celebration that happens in chat.
Yeah, I popped a bottle of champagne that night when we first hit it. It was it felt good.
We were in there when the U.S. voted the first day, and then the most of the West, and we kind of started like Canada and everyone else, and we started to fall down. And then when the whales voted, we were out. We were like number 40 something. It was super depressing.
Yeah, that's how we fell out. We lost one vote that was, I think, 30 to 40% of our overall vote weight, and it just dropped us. We went from like 16th to 30 something, and then it just kind of worked our way back. So it's just,
you
keeping
just create value. Yeah. Just keep creating value, and like, don't let it bum you out. And as long as you're in that top 0.5%, even if you're just getting 100 tokens, 200 tokens a day, like, see that. I think most of us who are very serious and want the best for the network are really more focused on adoption and like stewardship and positioning, like not just our own careers or ourselves to be able to benefit from this, but to be able to like show like what we believe is like the right way to do it, is like, hey, we're lean by design. We're not a huge operation. We're not a big 30-man team, and there's different factors, maybe 2 or 3, 4 people up to maybe 10 or 12. And like EOS Nation has in some ambassadors, but I don't think anyone is trying to necessarily scale up to this big 30, 50 person operation. There's certainly people in China who've taken that route, and not that that's wrong, but someone pointed out, well, that makes sense in China because they have so many people. A lot of like half of those people are community people, and they're really trying to build dApps. They're trying to like build adoption is their whole focus, and they're just using it as a platform. They don't really care about, it's not just about the tokens or the rewards, where there's another mix of people like who are more independent who are like, the rewards are your stake to invest in dApps and bandwidth. You know what I mean? And create like the liquidity for these entrepreneurs. So you're kind of like a liquid incubator.
Yeah.
or something, you know what I mean? With a lot of us are positioning that way. So there's all different models, and no one of them are wrong, but it's very interesting from what you said that, that like, you know what I mean? That we get paid in this different structure. I thought Steemit worked very similar, and officially it doesn't work that way. Like,
no,
probably why there aren't as many witnesses or people trying to be witnesses. Whoever's in there is just kind of in there. And it's tough to, how long did it take you to get into, I think you're number 2 now on Steam?
Yeah, I worked probably for 3 or 4 months before I started to flip in and out of the top 20. And then I've been just kind of contributing there ever since, both in governance and in tools, but hasn't been terrible to maintain just because there's not a lot of competition. There's a lot of people who blog and write things and try to do marketing initiatives, and in general that just doesn't attract as many whales, I guess, to support you. But like when you're actually contributing, you're writing proposals, you're building tools, you're prototyping, you're trying to answer the hard questions,
whether that's design or engineering or whatever.
Yep.
If you're just trying to think out the key problems, people see a lot of value in that. So, maybe we don't have our brand all over this thing, but that's part of the marketing in it, that we're trying to, we're trying to solve the really important problems as a group and put our best foot forward. And we may not always agree, but it's a complex issue. If this call has not illustrated that, this is super complex. I mean, this is like game theory and economics and all in computer science and all these different disciplines in HCI and marketing. And I mean, Jesus Christ, man, like the hyper never ending kind of, campaigning that you have to do to stay in there is, I think there's a little fatigue there by comparison. You said it's not super hard to maintain in Steemit. I feel like it is kind of tough to maintain it. And the payoff, the balance there is that, yes, you get paid more rewards and stake, that's weighted against your votes, but it's very hard to maintain those votes. You have to constantly be doing something, and that can be very taxing when you're also trying to do other things like foster new DApp projects or build out plugins for the network itself. Like that seems, I mean, how many people do you guys have? Like 2-3 people at Greymass? So they're your core people and then a few contributors, or
I would say we probably have about 5 core people at this point, and maybe 2 or 3 contributors who are still fuzzy on positioning. And we're talking with a few more, but I think when you were talking about the different models of block producers, these bigger block producers also have to be careful. Like, if they are putting in a ton of their money to bootstrap this block producer organization that eventually doesn't pan out for whatever reason, like that is a risk to the network.
They're not going to be able to go I think it's a long game.
Yeah, this is a marathon.
Yeah.
This is absolutely a long game, and we're trying to very slowly grow ourselves, just because NEX and I have been in crypto for a while now and known each other for a while, and we're part of another group that has really dug deeply into a lot of different blockchains. But you just got to be really careful with these things. You can't go all in, even though it's EOS, and even though we all want the best for EOS, you shouldn't just like fire up $1 million business and put all your eggs in one basket. Because once it starts looking sour, if you pull out, what's that going to do to EOS?
Right. And that's very interesting because I feel like that's been echoed amongst the smaller to mid-sized BPs, that like on another side of that, EOS Nation appears really big, and I'd always made the assumption because of the people that I'd interfaced with initially that Stefan was one of the primary stakeholders, and actually Yves was the one who tried to really bring everyone together, and it was the core like glue that had kind of brought it. And they have 14%, and some of them still have jobs or have a little money put away to be able to do this. And their model is also a long game, but they are a little bit larger. And I think that seeing how they did it is another approach, like the ambassadorships and building a community focus.
Yep.
And a big focus on education, and kind of like really looking at like the secondary opportunities more so than the immediate, like getting the experience. And like Josh Kaufman from EOS Canada made this point that, we're really more focused. We're not just focused on just token accumulation. That's a component, but it's really just as much or more about the chops that you learn in the weeds of this new emerging stack, and being able to foster that and consult and the secondary and tertiary opportunities that come with it, which is a more sophisticated way, I think, that people who are looking at how that could work. It's kind of how, if you're coming into this game to be a VP, it is a long game, and you should be looking at those other opportunities more so than what you're going to get, because price fluctuates.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's going to be $7. It might go down to 4, might go up to 14. And if you're dependent to cash that out and you're leveraged, might not be a good deal for you. You know what I'm saying? That's just my take, but that's
so what a lot of BPs should be thinking about. They're the block producer rewards up in this front are the only thing right now, arguably, but you're right. There are so many future opportunities and ways to position yourself, just to be ready and to continue.
Yeah. I mean, do you think, and I want to hear Daniel's take on that, because you guys have a strong presence, but you don't talk a lot about your structure. I mean, it's on the site, but you don't talk a lot about the structure and y'all's vision internally, how you kind of want that to go down. It's just education and execution, but not a lot about, we split it up 14%. Like, how did that work? How did you guys get that to work among 4 or 5 people? Is that why you basically some of you still work jobs and stuff, because you're not necessarily looking to do that full time and go completely in? You're just contributors and split up the rewards.
Yeah. So we were fully self-funded. We came together, the 7 of us co-founders, back in February, and agreed from the start, okay, we're all going to be equal co-founders. We were all essentially just big EOS fans with varying experience in the industry, and we wanted to play to our strengths. And a big part of that was, we already had a great Facebook community, and we want to kind of grow that. Most of us are now full time. Now that we've starting to earn some rewards. Some of our co-founders had some capital saved up, so they were able to, leading up to the launch, have been working full time.
Yves had a little bit back and went over to China and just has been basically campaigning in China and Korea nonstop. He lives over there now, right?
That's pretty much. Yeah, he's going to be going back again in a few days or next week.
Me too. I'll be over in Seoul and then doing the EOS Gravity thing in Shanghai. So that'll be very interesting.
Yeah, because we're self-funded and because there are so many of us, and we had expenses, and we're still even paying back some of that, kind of the expenses that we built up leading up to the launch. That's why I'm still working, but it's probably very short term that I'll be not full time on EOS. We're getting to a point where I'm going to be, okay, it's time to go.
You apply your project management chops to a lot of the craziness, because it's like a lot of creatives, Denny and you are like the more structured people, and Yves and the other guys are just like, woohoo, you know what I mean? And that's good. That's a good dynamic. You got to have both personalities, but it's very interesting. It would be interesting to see you up in the mix more, because you're more like, okay, guys, we have to be on schedule here. And not that they aren't, but you know what I mean? Just structured and reserved and all that stuff. That's another part of it. So no tongue rings. Right.
Yeah.
I think both is cool. I think that's, it's like part of the culture,
that's a big part. We think that, having that diverse is it makes us stronger. Various approaches and perspectives. But at the same time, we all have a common vision. We all want to see EOS succeed. We all believe in Dan Lemmer's vision, to find free market solutions to defend life, liberty, and property. That's really what brought us all together, what attracted us to EOS.
Isn't that great that that core libertarian ideal that has become a euphemism for really just left-leaning politics, it didn't start out that way. That's what America was founded on. One of the, greatest social experiments. I mean, we're not part of the Commonwealth. We fought for that independence, you know what I mean? And mentioning Trudeau earlier, I mean, that inspired a lot of other thought processes that went in different directions. But fundamentally, that idea of like non-intervention, nonviolence, like, free markets, sound money is really powerful. Like, that's, sovereignty. You are you can do whatever the hell you want with I may not agree with it, but I respect your right to do that. You know what I mean? And that's what we're really expediting here with EOS that no one catches.
Right.
Exactly. Is what we've experienced in the West largely, for hundreds of years, now is being expedited to places like South America and Uganda and places that had maybe previously been, somewhat totalitarian, or not had those freedoms, or just been a kleptocracy and been like, been really, they have no way to store their land title or they're underbanked. And I'm not talking social. And that's the thing. People label any talk of that as, oh, you're just a freaking social justice warrior. And it's like, no, like, don't people understand that that's in our interest in the West? That if we expedite through technology, people to have a more equitable, to be banked and to have identity in these things, they don't want to bomb us. So our military expenses get cut in half. We'll still have to have it because one guy's got a gun and one doesn't at some point. If something goes down, I'm not one of those people that's like, we should have no military at all and we all just need to disarm. That's going to be a slow process of hundreds and hundreds of years of AI and automation and things where we just don't do it because we don't need to.
Yeah. And there's so much untapped like intellectual capital.
Oh yeah. Like
there's going to be, now that we have something like EOS that can help fund some of the, people in the developing world, we're going to start seeing some amazing things being created because now finally they have an entry into the market with the rest of the world.
If you said that before, that was idealism back 10, 20 years ago, but now there's technology that facilitates it. So this is like idealism with like a pragmatic approach with like, hey, let that guy get a land title because that's the foundations of how you build wealth. Right. Let him have a wallet or a bank and identity so he can like prove that the stuff is his. And then even an arbitration system or governance layer where he can actually go and arbitrate against people in his own country and subvert that process through an internationally recognized, that might be a kangaroo court. It may not be always, recognized, but it could certainly be a process that over time would start to disrupt that kleptocracy, those they say third world countries. Underdeveloped is a much better way of putting that, or developing world, and that's just the American propaganda machine that has shaped that narrative over many, many years. And, I think the West in general, particularly Americans, we're getting our asses handed to us. We're realizing and being humbled, those of us that are woke, that we're not the best. We're not. We're good. We're freaking good. We've got our value is in communications and creativity and the intellectual property and the ideas.
Right. And you guys are founded on those ideas of freedom that really helped propel.
Right. Could you go to China and love them to death? I mean, the most brilliant people and just freaking super driven to execute on what they know because they've had that freedom beat out of them for so long. Because their governments have been overbearing to some extent, you know what I mean? And it may be times where that's changing now. They're being less so that. It's still some remnants of that, but that's different countries can govern their people the way that they want. And we have no right to say otherwise. You know what I mean? As much as we want to expedite that to the world, you don't expedite it that way. you lead from behind, and that us being humbled and getting a little bit of what Canada is a good example has been kind of on for some time now, for a good 40, 50 years of well, what do we do? What can we do? What is our place in this? And just having a humble stewardship kind of approach to that kind of stuff is that'll help serve us to all get along better. You know what I'm saying? So it's a good thing that Americans are getting their asses handed to them. You know what I mean? It is. It is.
Competition, I think, is good for everybody.
It is. You know what I'm saying? And our value isn't in maybe manufacturing anymore and some of these other things. It's in high technology, communications. We're the comms people of the world. We're, charismatic. We have some attributes that we could use to still keep our, some even field of position, but we may not be number one. You know what I'm saying? We may be among the top 4 or 5 and that's okay. You know what I mean? Maybe, like you said, competition is good. So,
yeah. And we're going to get to a point where like borders are going to matter less and we're in a global economy now that more and
Canada
more
won't let you in if you've got a freaking ticket. Like they will like put you under the microscope. You know, they pulled up a ticket. They let me in, but my friend had a DUI, and they pulled up my ticket. We're like, oh, you had a traffic ticket about 8 years ago. I see. And I'm like, good Lord. Like, okay, sorry. They didn't let him. I went into Vancouver and had a fun time. And he sat basically at this port or, coming in this like checkpoint, like for 8 hours. Pretty sad,
but EOS has no borders.
Yep.
Well, ideally that's how it would work. And I think that to the other side of that, we have to be super, super, we have to self-evaluate and not get into that like idealism so much where it's going to change the world, because it's just a protocol. We can't let it become a love fest either. We have to be like, okay, realistically, this is a protocol. This is one way to solve a problem. You know what I mean? And these are the steps to execution for us to be able to expedite this system or variants of it to the rest of the world so they can experience what we have. And they have these tools, even if they don't have a physical bank or system. They have the wallets and the way to do that amongst themselves, because we define that value. I think that's what came out of this whole crypto thing is, the other thing that makes me mad is the tribalism among projects. And I was just talking on an interview today with Crypto Blood about how, like, if you're in crypto, if you're in blockchain and you're an Ethereum fanboy or you're a maximalist and you hate on EOS, like, these are just different ways it would be like you being a freaking like, an email fanboy or a TPS fanboy or something. Like it's just completely, it makes absolutely no sense to me to hate on people that are a part or maybe favor or more prevalent in another project because you want to single them out and then cast doubt on them because of the project. Like, because I hate this project, I hate you. And that's like really, really toxic. I mean, it's a male dominated culture. It's not hospitable for women at all. We look like a bunch of jerks, and it's just crass and rude, and we need to clean it up. And I think that's what the EOS ecosystem represents, is like more seasoned entrepreneurs, more seasoned engineers that are not about that, that are like, trying to solve real problems. And this is just one of many different protocols. Cause I got love for Ethereum. Like, there are real use cases for Ethereum.
Yeah,
there is. I got love for, for Bitcoin. I mean, that was the first coin, that I understood. Oh, okay. There is Joe. All right. Joe needs to thank you. We were just basically talking about the tribalism of a lot of crypto and how if you say that you're all about EOS, like they'll, people in Ethereum and people in, people in Bitcoin and maximalists will just kind of attack you and associate you with a less than reputable person because they view the project as not their perfect view of how, crypto or blockchain should work. And I think that that's really toxic. I don't know if you've experienced that, because Asia tends to be a little bit more open-minded and they're kind of fanning out on EOS right now. They don't have as many negative people, but if you've experienced that, it sucks.
I didn't experience that yet. Like, example, today I'm meeting with the NEO CEO, Daunfe, you know him, and he's open to actually understanding how EOS works. Not so much like Bitcoin, but I can understand, like, people in Bitcoin will say, hey, that's wrong. Ethereum, hey, that's wrong. And NEO is kind of also in the same situation of EOS, actually.
Sucks, man. We got to get away from that. Like, and at the same time, we can't be haters too in that. We can't like hate on them because they hate on us. Like, we have to, it's hard too, because I've experienced this. There's like two groups of people. There's just the hyper competitive local the townie that just wants to pull you down and it's not even about the protocol. It's not even about EOS. They just hate you, and they want to like, yeah, this is a good opportunity for me to shit on this guy. Like, great. Screw those guys. Like, tell them to F off. But there's actual legitimate arguments from academics and people that are, you know, in Ethereum that don't view this form of BFT or reaching consensus is legit. And I think that they can't project, you know, their view of what a protocol should be, but we also shouldn't play into that. We have to be like the cool kids that are like, oh man, it's all good, dude. No, check it out. Like, we got to be the dudes that you want to have a beer with at the bar, you know, like, oh man, you're cool, man. I think this is actually, I got a more open mind about it. Thanks for being, even if they're douchebags, even if they're rude to us, we have a responsibility, especially block producers, to actually be patient, which is hard. I've fallen off that a few times myself with some locals, you know, that just were using it to pull me down and go after me because they just didn't want to see me getting on interviews and coming up. You know, they were just like, screw you. Yeah, I saw Richard Hart ate your lunch and you got what you deserved because I've always hated you. I don't like your face. You know, and it's like, that's just the hometown, the townies. We all know them. They're never going to go anywhere. They're going to sit there and just chase their tail and never do anything because they focus more on pulling. They think they have to pull others down to bring themselves up. But within that, like, there's also legitimate people who criticize us. That's why I went on Richard Hart. People are like, why would you do that? You know, he's just going to shill his coin. He's going to shill his bag, dude. That's what he does. It's in his interest. Because we have to be able to do that. We have to, at the end of it, 3/4 of the interview, we're cutting up. And he's hitting me up saying, man, you're cool, dude. If you're over here, like, hit me up. I'm over. He kind of told me the area he was in. I'll be there in Europe, you know, this summer and probably into the summer. And I'll probably hang out with Richard and have a beer. And that's what we want, to break down those walls where, like, even though we want to, like, correct them and be kind of snarky ourselves, we have to be bigger than that. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard because some of these people do suck, you know?
Catch more bees with honey.
So, Joe, what is going on in Asia right now? Just so everyone on the call, got probably another like 15, 20 minutes and we're going to shut it down. Like, it's kind of your turn to speak on the war report in Asia and what most of us in the West need to kind of know about right now and what's important. I heard like EMAC is like really big right now.
Yeah, I noticed EMAC, but I didn't follow too much because I was focused on the WPS, the Worker Proposal System. And what
just
I
in
noticed,
general, like the last month, even, you know, for those of us that have no idea.
Like, everyone noticed that there is a lot of like collusion, right, with the voting system. And then I asked myself, is this something wrong or not? Actually, this is how the system has been developed. It's made to be like this. The people who have the most tokens decide what to do with their tokens, right? And they are deciding to do this. One day, like, probably you've noticed our score in the list. One day we're top 21, the day after we're 40, 42.
And we felt both too. One day we were like 48, 49, about to fall off. And then we're up in the top, you know, we're 25, 26. And
yeah, I don't know what happens, but actually when you see that the top 21 are people that you've never heard before, and they're just staying there or playing with the votes, etc. You understand that there is something behind. You cannot understand what there is behind. And that's it. Even if you come here, you will not understand it because they're keeping it for themselves, you understand?
So you think that there's actually whales that are voting in multiple nodes?
That's certain. Like, I saw a few days ago someone in the top 50. There was three or four block producers, candidates, with strange names like Monkey EOS, Voldemort EOS, all with the same votes, like whales votes, just to get some rewards from the voting rewards, you understand? They don't want to get on the top 21 because they will be too much spotted. In the top 50, you're still fine. Like, you still get rewards, no one care about you, and you're fine. And it's all the same person. Probably someone in the top 21 who is just voting that in order to get 3 or 4 times the rewards, you understand? And you don't notice it. That's it. Now I don't know if they're still there, but let me search. Voldemort EOS.
Voldemort. That is awful, dude. That is so bad. You know, like it's not what it's about, man. I guess it is though, because it's.
I think it disappeared. Yeah. Monkey. Yeah, I cannot find him anymore. Oh no, it's still there. 82.
What a mess. So you don't know who they are. It's not like there's people pointing the finger. Wasn't there some big outrage in China though about this, like just recently over the last week or so, pointing this stuff out? I mean, I saw it in some of the WeChats that they're like,
what exactly?
They're screen capping voting patterns. It just spilled over into Gov. But so that seems to be like China is really focused on the voting patterns and like who's associated with who. They're more so than maybe we realize in the West. They're watching that stuff.
It's more association, like you say. It's more like people, because there are a lot of token holders with a lot of tokens. So they're more there for exchanging things, you understand? There is no, hey, you're doing the most, I will give you the votes. But
it was, you're going to do something for me, and I'm going to give you the votes.
Probably. And, but because what you can see is that the Chinese BPs are just keep changing all the time, you see? But the foreign BPs most of them are just there, just in the top 21, not changing much. Why? I think they understand that foreign BPs need to be there, so they will just vote for foreign BPs, and they will leave foreign BPs. But for the Chinese BPs, they will keep changing them, you understand?
Mm. See, I think that's unhealthy to have 7, 8, 12 people all in Beijing though. I mean, not that 2 or 3 is bad, in one city or one region, but I mean, certainly having 10 or 12 last I counted all in Beijing or in the same exact city in the top 40 or something is probably not the best distribution, right? Like we want a little better than that. There's 2 or 3 US BPs that are.
You think it like this, let's say I'm Italian, so if most of the tokens were in Italy and I can't speak English and I were one of the top token holders, I will vote for most of the Italians BPs, you understand? Mm-hmm. Because I understand most of the Italian BPs and I don't know exactly what other BPs think, because I cannot understand what other BPs think, you understand? Same thing happening with China. So most of the tokens are in China. They don't understand English, but they understand all the Chinese BPs. So they will just vote for most of the Chinese BPs.
And you think that's so? What is the average? What would you say the average education on voter education or awareness is in overall in China? Like, how would you break that down into? Do you think that? What I've heard is that a lot of the whales are largely just going by the advice of the exchanges, and whoever's they even delegate that sometimes to the people handling the account, and they make the decision. And those interfaces are like Bitfinex and a few primary accounts, and that's they aren't paying attention to all the politics of that. There's oh well, they say we need to distribute the vote to 30, do that. I know Paulo came out and did that, but. Do you, and then under that is maybe the dolphin layer of people may have 50, 100,000 tokens or under are, they're a little bit more aware. And then actually the smaller token holders are the most aware. That's kind of how it is in the West. Is that also how it is over in China or Asia right now?
Yeah, it looks like this, but for the small token holders, they don't really care about voting because you understand that they never voted before. And it's difficult to understand the value of voting. You understand? I saw a lot of groups where they say why I should vote.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's our biggest problem. that we face, hence EOS votes, just like EOS portal. At least the people in the West and parts of Europe understood why they needed to vote and use scatter. And between that and like Aaron and their efforts with the Greymass wallet, that activated a percentage, but it's still probably a third or more of Bitfinex votes.
Yeah, so example, I was in the EOS Gravity group, one of community group.
Mm-hmm.
So EOS Gravity, yeah, they have a lot of, they have a big community. And people in their community were saying why I should vote, even if it's for EOS Gravity. Like, it's so complicated, I don't want to do it. Or stuff like this. But you see, EOS Gravity teach them a lot of things in the last year, and they still don't want to vote for them because so that's what I noticed.
That sucks. I mean, that's very bleak. I would ask Aaron, like, what could we do to remedy that? Like, do you think Dan's proposal to incentivize voting through the RAM inflation now has a lot more relevance?
I didn't read it yet.
Basically, just to give you a primer, Dan had suggested in a group that perhaps the RAM fees were not burned and they were actually given to people who staked and voted. And those fees would be paid out as passive like revenue for voting, and that would further incentivize voting. So that's the gist. I would be interested to hear Aaron's take on what you just said, basically. That sucks.
That's interesting. I mean, I think if it were going to be given to, if the fees were not going to be burned and to be given to people instead, like to stakeholders instead somehow, adding voting as a stipulation would be a good way to get to like encourage people who don't have any encouragement. I don't know if it should be specifically targeted that like, we're going to make you vote because we're going to pay you money. There's something a little weird about that. But I mean, if it's two stakeholders who have staked, they have staked network and bandwidth or CPU and bandwidth, and that they are voting and they are participating, those might be good criteria. And then maybe if there is another action down the road, like maybe participating in referendum voting or something else that's for like to solicit that opinion, to drive that home that, like this is important to the community. So we're going to take this that we would have burned and rule now.
Yeah, the tricky part with that is you got to watch out for throwaway votes. If we start incentivizing people to vote for the sake of a reward, exactly. What is going to be the incentive for them to put any thought into that vote? I'm just going to pick the
staking pools that have like staking pools like Cardano is trying to do, where it actually incentivizes a better reward structure for making for staking with decisions that were in line. Now, how are they going to actually validate that? I think there's a secondary layer of people who validate that or whatever, but I don't know. That's a very interesting game theory scenario. I don't think it's an easy thing to solve.
No. I mean, it's one thing if BPs are trying to pay people to vote, but it's a different thing if we're talking about like a system-wide EOS.
No, I think, if it's BPs, it's worse, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're in the same page.
Yep.
But once we open the door of paying for votes, even if it's made with EOS RAM, right, then BPs paying for vote is going to be something that is more acceptable. You understand?
Yeah.
The door is open already.
I think that's why it needs to be made clear that like the inflation goes to everyone, or the RAM fees would go to everyone. You're not getting it because you're voting, but your vote and participating in the vote is a stipulation of your way to earn it. I don't know. Better. You're right. It's a gray area. It really is. And it could go either way. It could be a huge amount of drama. It could not. Like maybe investors would like that enough to try to help quell the drama.
right now there's a lot of people, we talked about this earlier, that people don't even know how they got their tokens on an exchange and they can't even create themselves an account because you need an account to create an account.
Yep.
You need RAM to fund that. So people are kind of stuck with this catch-22 of, I want to vote, but my tokens are stuck.
Yep. I actually just saw on another, well, this wouldn't work with EOS, never mind.
That's great, man. We've touched on a lot of stuff. Like is there anything anybody wants to kind of chime in before we kind of shut off here? Joe kind of caught the tail end. Is there anything you want to plug, Joe, or just something you want to try to get across in this last like 5 minutes of your concerns?
Before I heard you talking about the referendum, you said that it's going to be limited, right?
It's going to be what?
The referendum, the proposal of the referendum are going to be limited.
Yeah, like I can explain one part of that, and that is that, and even Aaron didn't fully understand this. When people said that it's going to be one account that is the only account that can actually approve referendum to be voted on, that's a fundamental way that the system works. The top 21 has to have 2/3 plus 1 to actually push a referendum that had been, proposed. Now, in the early days, the top 21 are really, or at least the top 0.5%, are the only governing body elected by token holders through rewards. So by de facto, there's no other governing body to handle this. As Daniel expounded, and we went back and forth in the in the referendum group where we're working on a proof of concept, that we're in a weird situation, just like the ECAP situation. Where we're basically like having to be the legislative branch and the governing, all of it. And because there's no one to take that over. So he had proposed, and others in the group, that the very first referendum that we propose is who to hand over that power to, so the public can vote on any referendum or propose any referendum they want, but we don't have the tools and the plugins to actually enable that functionality right now at scale. And many of us don't have the money or the resources to do all that. Even that's got to be shared and semi-centralized in the early days. So I'll let Aaron kind of explain the more technical side, because you're pretty technical yourself, Joe, and then maybe Daniel if he wants to chime in.
Of which part of that? I'm sorry.
Basically, I was just explaining the basics of, how referendum is proposed versus how it's pushed through the system. That's done through the EOSIO account, the system contract, and it takes a 2/3 plus 1 majority to actually pass a referendum. Once it's been passed, that has to be pushed out into the core code. Right. And that can only be done by 2/3 plus 1. And that's just the way DPoS works. That's just the way the actual system works. Don't think that's, but it's being debated that at least the top 0.5% can propose the initial referendum. They just can't be the same thing because votes are so spread out already, and they don't want to dilute that. So that's some of the limitations, but I was just going to let you explain a little more of the technical side and what's being done from your proposal or whatever.
It's the 2/3 plus 1 is just it's how we would even upgrade RAM. It is a core part of the way that the consensus is built within all of the block producers that are elected. So it sounds for this referendum contract that they'd be using, have to use it at the end, but they're also talking about putting it in the beginning to even get it past proposal to be voted on, it sounds like. And that it sounds like it's just because it's being done on an EOSIO dot something account. That can be a discussion that we could have at some point too. If it were on that account, it wouldn't have that requirement up front. But since that requirement is also still on the end of the BPs actually have to run this software, it has to be built and it actually has to be run by 2/3 plus 1 of the block producers to actually, engage. So
Daniel, you have some good knowledge and understanding of that as well on the other side, on just what percentage of people we in the top 0.5 that we would allow to at least propose a referendum, and what your thoughts on that. I think you articulated that well in the meetings.
Yeah. So, and this, my understanding, this is evolving. Even like today, I was having a conversation with Josh Coffin from EOS Canada, and he, I think I may have misunderstood some of it even on the call yesterday. But my current understanding, which could be flawed, is that we'd have, so there's going to be one. We want to make sure that there's not a mess of any million different proposals coming on at once. BPs are currently this one trusted elected party who control the EOS-IO account, and they would be able to put, with their 2/3 plus one vote, they would be able to, with that account, put forward a proposal that UIs could reference and be, okay, this is a trusted, we know that this is a proposal coming from these 2/3 plus one of the top elected BPs. At the same time, from what I understand, there's nothing that could prevent anybody from, with my own personal account, putting forward a proposal. But a UI wouldn't necessarily be listening to that. But there's nothing potentially to stop a group forming, saying, hey, we're going to build up some reputation, and we're going to start using this. We're going to create an account called, Referendum Group, and we're going to put the right, work in place to make sure that our proposals are formatted in the appropriate way, and that we've looked around at what's out there, and there's not some duplicate proposal already out there. If they gain that reputation, there's nothing to stop them from talking to, hey, Greymass, make us a default account that you listen to. And then you would start seeing proposals from both this BP account and this new group.
Yep.
That's my current understanding. And then at the end, it has to be ratified by again, the 2/3 plus one BP vote.
And I think I think, Joe, if you can impart that on the Asian community in general, in China and in Hong Kong, and the people that you talk to, that the thing that needs to be understood is it's just the way the system works. There's people at uproar saying, oh, there's only one account. Why can't anyone propose this? It's like, because if you just submit, I want to change something, and there's no code or no actual structure. And again, Luke Stokes pointed this out, and I do agree with him after fully thinking it out, that you have to have a structured change. You actually have to have the exact change you're talking about in the proposal, in the JSON file that is ready to reference and push out, to be changed. You can't just go propose something ephemeral and say, hey, I want to change this. Let's, change the name spacing, like I said earlier, to Bodie McBoatface. But you don't actually have the code to ship with that. So that gets voted in and approved. What does the top 21 do with that? So there's actually a reason to vet the referendums before they just roll out to the public, because one, that's going to dilute votes, and that defeats the purpose at a time where we need to get some of the stuff changed. And two, they have to have teeth, and there has to be a proposal process. We have to understand what we are proposing for referendum. So that's where we're at a high level for the whole community. I'm going to upload this in a few places just to make sure that everyone can kind of benefit from our current conversations. And I do this every week or two. This show is called The State, and it's just basically people who are working on high-level infrastructure projects, people from the community that there's tough issues that people want to know what the hell it is. And then also us as BPs, as block producers, we're not colluding. We have open discussions about this stuff. Just because we're in a private group working on one specific thing or one nit, or might complain about something going on in the network or somebody that was an asshole or something, doesn't mean that we have any ties to each other. We don't know each other. Many of us have never even hung out. And then we do these recordings to try to make sure that anything that we have done, is visible in public and in the spirit of transparency. Because we don't always get along. We don't. It's not all peachy keeney, man. And from what I'm understanding, it's very much like that in the Asian community too. They're all snarky with each other and not all best buddies or anything. There is some in any system, there is some level of collusion with a higher level VC. And I think that because there's financial ties, and that's what we might need to be worried about, both in the US and in over in China and Asia. So did you want to extend on that, Joe? It looks like you want to say something.
No, I just wanted to understand more about the referendum, like the timeline, etc. But I think I can read on the group, right? There's going to be...
It's probably going to be the next 3 to 4 weeks before we get the UI and the backend components to come together. And it may be another week or two to deploy that in my guesstimates based on what I'm seeing now, but it may be up to another month and a half or 2 months. I don't know. None of us know 100% right now today. We'll know more in the next week or so on when that is like, okay, we've got a good foundation here and this is how it's going to work. And we all agree on that. I mean, it's like the launch. We may not all agree on that for like an extra week or something that we didn't afford for. I think there's a lot of urgency right now. So all of us are probably, as long as it's legit and like there's a good balance there. And that's just what happened this last week. Because we didn't all get along on it. Like Daniel wanted to wait to put out the message. I thought we needed to put out immediately and start discussing this because it was going to end up a bad PR thing. And I didn't, I'm an independent operator. Respect, my intuition to do what I want to do, even if it isn't right and I fall on my face. It sparked this larger discussion. And that's all I was wanting. It was like, guys, we need to move away from saying this is in control of the EMLG group because everyone under the top 25 perceives that to basically be like 3 or 4 people running that. So you're basically saying these 3 or 4 people are in control of Referendum. Don't do that. Like, even though that's not what was happening, there are people thinking that's what's happening. And we have to like think about that stuff sometimes. So Kevin came out and said, there's no EMLG. This is just a launch group. This is all top 21 block producers. That's all it is. And now they're starting to use that language because they're like, oh, wait, this does look like that.
Right.
So somebody has to take it on the chin, and you'll find a lot of the times that I do that, it's because of that I just see there's a problem. And if someone doesn't throw themselves into this right now, this is about to be a headline on CoinDesk. It is. And like, I don't want that. Like, I want the token to stay at a decent price. So when I get a payout, I can feed my family. Sorry. Like maybe I'm a little selfish, but it's in our interest to get our stuff together and do this stuff. You know what I mean? Like our incentives are aligned, even if we don't agree. You know what I mean? And that's, anyways, I guess does anybody want to say anything else just to kind of bring it home?
No, just thanks for having us on to chat about this. I think it's it's great that we're having this discussion.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Totally agreed.
And thank you, Aaron, because you're super busy, and to stop for a few hours and really dig into this, like, please, during this referendum process, every like few weeks that I do this, like for an hour or two, like just come on, and even if it's ugly, and even if people don't like it, and if we don't agree, try to make sure that those of us who are working on this are extra, like super visible and transparent in sharing that with everyone, during this time period until it's done. Like we have a responsibility to do that. And I'm not trying to be all like, we are the world, like it's, but it's the truth. Like we do need to like come together a little bit on this and just agree to even disagree, but put it out there.
Absolutely.
And just say, this is what we're working on. This is what we understand about it. And if something changes, we'll come out and, and with different, that's where we all need to have our different, like you had your proposal, like EOS Nation needs to kind of have their overall view of this. It's particularly Daniel himself because he's working on it. EOS Canada needs to, and Josh and them are coming out with one. We'll probably come out with a follow-up to our UI and things we've discovered. And then in that, in these videos, they're getting this public discussion. They're getting like, oh, okay, that's what they're doing. Cool. You know how much that quells this freaking like FUD just to know? Oh, yep. You guys are the guys doing it, and this is what you're doing. That's like PR 101, dude. Like if people don't know, they will totally assume it's the end of the world. Like we're all going to die. Like the tokens, it's going down, waterfall. Like they will though. Like we've seen it over and over again. So let's just like, I'll share this video to a Dropbox. You guys are free to also upload it in your channel, share it with your people. Like, and we just go through this process because this is hard.
Yep. It really is.
Super hard. This is one of the hardest things I've done in terms of just the people skills needed and the UX layer and just all of it is freaking super difficult. And I need you guys' help.
Yeah.
I cannot do this on my own, man. Like if I wanted to. And that goes for EOS Canada and their work too. They've done a phenomenal job. They weren't on this call today. Josh will probably be on the next one, but they have done to give them credit, they have done a phenomenal job in EOS 42.
Doing awesome work for sure.
Yeah. To contribute to this. We're just, we're just basically the lipstick and the plug-in trying to make it happen, but and the project management, but I'm sure they'll be on as well to say their piece. But anyways, I'll let you guys go.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Bye.
Thank you guys. God bless.